Good morning. I just wanted to, I know maybe I'm beating a dead horse, but I'm going to talk again about religious freedom as a response to some tweets that we're talking about. And I want to specifically talk about religious freedom as opposed to talking about the education issue per se, but it's directly related to this education issue. We have to learn to separate between the government laws and our laws, our religious laws. Our government laws and our religious laws. They're both our laws, and religiously we are obligated to follow civil law, although you can argue that Dina the Malchus Dina could be interpreted in different ways. But there is such a thing that that the law of the land is the law. Whether we're talking as it could be a whole discussion. Let's say you're in a civil lawsuit with someone who's not Jewish, and they render a law, a verdict. You have to follow it. That's the if you have a lawsuit with someone Jewish, you should have arbitration and Beis Din. But in some cases, you can get a heter Beis Din to go to our coast also. So, but that's not what we're talking about here. Right now, we're talking about someone is arguing that from a religious standpoint, they're pointing to a Mishnah that says that a father has to teach his son a trade, and if he doesn't, it's like he's teaching him theft. But the person knows, leaving out the end of the Mishnah, where Rabbi Naharai says, I put aside all trades, and the only trade I teach my son is Torah, because a materialistic trade, it might get a person through his youth, but then it abandons him in old age. But Torah stays with a person all throughout their life, and even to old age, and even to the afterlife as well. And I see it. My rabbi is advanced in years, and he has a youthful vigor despite having health issues recently that you don't see in people who are 20 years younger than him, or 30 years younger than him, or even me, who's more than that younger than him. So there certainly is truth to how much Torah keeps a person all throughout their life. But putting that aside, going back to this issue about the question of religious freedom. So the state is not in the business of deciding these issues of religious freedom as far as which religion to follow. Meaning that's a fundamental difference between American approach to religion and most other countries in the world. Meaning if you go to South Africa, you go to Germany, you go to Finland, the government is running the churches, the synagogues, the mosques. Meaning if you're Jewish in Germany, you're paying a tax that is distributed to the Jewish community for the upkeep of the synagogue, to pay the rabbi's salary, and whatever other communal needs the Jewish community has. And it's a government, it's socialized religion. America is not like that. And so in Germany, you have, the official government recognized Jewish communities, which you had this in Hungary, you had, I don't know what it is today, but in the old days was like that. And that was the whole story. Yes, there was the Yahrzeit of Chassam Sofer. It was the whole That was the whole story with the Chassam Sofer, with the separating from between the Neolog and the Orthodox community. Same thing in Germany with Rav Hirsch, separating the Jewish communities. In America, every church is essentially what we would call a congregational polity, even those that are not. Meaning, obviously, the Catholic Church, most all these different churches are not really congregationalist in their polity at all. But as far as the government is concerned, they are. And they, and so they have their choice to answer. Who they're answering to is their own choice. Meaning, if therefore a group of Catholics decide they want to split away and start what they have the independent Catholic Church that has nothing to do with Rome, they can do that. Nobody can stop them from doing it. The only arguments could possibly be about, if who owns a piece of property or something, and it's owned by a diocese and this and that, and that's the issues. But I'm saying religiously wise, so then if half the members of the local Catholic Church decide they want to join a different group or start their own group, there's absolutely nothing that can stop them in America. But then it goes even more than that, because every individual, which obviously in Europe and so forth, the individuals have, they just don't go to church, as opposed to in America, far more people are going to church in America than in Europe, per capita. And obviously America is a bigger country too, but we're talking here per capita. It's the same problem in Israel. You have the Rabbanut, they're the official government religion, to the point where, much more pious and distinguished rabbinical scholars are not recognized by the Rabbanut. Meaning, we just had Chazon Ish's nephew, Reb Nissen Karelitz, was nifter over Yontiv, and his Bezdin made many geirs, very choshev geirs, from choshev geirs. The Rabbanut doesn't recognize it, to the point where you have a horrible story right now in Israel, where there was someone, he converted to Judaism. He was a Muslim, Palestinian, converted to Judaism, became a very pious Jew. He went to go visit his family, and his brothers came and beat him up and tortured him. And the Israeli government doesn't care, because they don't recognize him as really Jewish, because he converted with an ultra-Orthodox independent Bezdin and not with the government Bezdin. And I blame the Israeli government more than anybody in this whole story. Because they've politicized religion. If there was Jeffersonian religious freedom, you wouldn't have these type of stories either. And a lot of it also has to do with if Israel would just annex all the land and put law and order there in the Palestinian territories, but because they care about maintaining this artificial Jewish, quote-unquote Jewish whatever majority, to have a quote-unquote Jewish state, that's, if you had just a non-sectarian state like America and you had Jeffersonian religious freedom, even if you had what I've discussed before, you have a certain level of federalism, where maybe you have individual states or counties or whatever you want to call them, districts, where if on the local level they want to have official religious authorities on the local level but not on the federal level, that would be within the realm of federalism. That's how America was really until officially the First Amendment Establishment Clause did not apply to state and local governments until an erroneous Supreme Court decision in about 1947. if you really want to get into history of that. But that's really neither here nor there. The issue at hand here, though, is, and now how it is, that even though perhaps it was erroneous, historically speaking, the states and the local governments also have constitutions that guarantee religious freedom. And that's how these things were already taken care of, and it wasn't really a federal issue, it was really a state and local issue. But with all this being said, in the spirit of Jeffersonian religious freedom, we have to understand, what does it really mean? And as a chaplain, this is the way, again, we'll compare it. I'm not doing this to pick on the Catholics, but they're a good example because they have a very clear religious structure. And they're clearly not Congregationalists in their polity as far as their church sees it. But as far as the U.S. government sees it, or any local, state or local government for that matter, within the U.S., since that Supreme Court decision, and really even before that, because the state and local governments have their own constitutions and their own recognitions of religious freedom. The Establishment Clause means that there is no establishment of one official religion over another, even to the point where the example that we'll give is, I'll have to, the way the courts understand it today is that religious freedom, meaning to the point was within a certain denomination, if there is a schism, the government cannot take sides over a schism. I'll have to, I'll harken back to a different story here. There was I used to go daven at his kever. Yechezkel Pavlovich was the chief rabbi in Richmond, Virginia, and I would make pilgrimages to his grave often. He never had children. One of the few stories that I have about him, and I have a few stories about him. One of the few stories that I have about him was that he was called to testify at a court case concerning, and he cited Shulchan Aruch, and this is brought down in legal books. There was a cantor from his shul, I think he was a sheikh also, who passed away. He was buried in the Orthodox cemetery. And when after he passed away, his wife and children became Reform. They joined the Reform synagogue, and the widow, when she passed away, she was buried in the Reform cemetery. And they had the Orthodox rabbis, and the children wanted to move their father's body to the Reform cemetery next to their mother. So they had the Reform rabbis testifying and the conservative and the Orthodox rabbis testifying. So Orthodox rabbis said the code of Jewish law says you're allowed to move a wife to be next to her husband, but not a husband next to the wife. And Rabbi Pavlovich and another rabbi from Petersburg came and testified this. And then the Reform rabbi said, Your Honor, he said the Reform Jews and most Jews, in his understanding, have long repudiated the code of Jewish law, just as the Protestants repudiated Catholicism. So at first the court didn't know what to do because they said they can't pick sides in a religious battle. But when he said this, he made it clear that in the judge's eye, that he wouldn't take, let's say a Catholic husband was buried in the Catholic cemetery and the wife was buried in the Protestant cemetery. they're practically two religions almost. They're not two religions, they're both Christianity, but he wouldn't move the Catholic husband to the Protestant cemetery to be by his wife. So the same thing here. After the Reform rabbi's testimony, he's not going to move the Orthodox husband to the Reform cemetery. And so, this Reform rabbi thought he was being very shrewd, and he actually destroyed his own case. But I'll give you another example. If in our prison system, if we have a Catholic inmate who claims that he needs a kosher diet, and I'm just saying the Catholics because they have a clear religious hierarchy, and let's say there's a deacon works there in the prison, he's a chaplain like we have, and the deacon says, no, he doesn't need the kosher diet. Look at, meaning the inmate's pointing to Leviticus, and the deacon points to the book of Acts. And, the whole story with Peter and his dream and this and that, again, there are different interpretations of that, but clearly the Catholic interpretation of that is that the kosher laws don't apply anymore. As pretty much, that's at least not to those who are in the church. So again, there's other Christians that interpret that differently, but that's how that's how most Catholics would interpret that. Now. He says. So then the inmate says, "Well, you're just a deacon. Let's ask the priest." So you have a priest who comes and celebrates Mass once a month, and the priest says, "No, you don't need a kosher diet." So no, ask the Monsignor. The Monsignor says no. Ask the bishop. The bishop says no. Ask the cardinal. The cardinal says no. The cardinal asks the pope, and the pope says no, he doesn't need a kosher diet. And the inmate still insists that he needs a kosher diet, and he also insists that he's Catholic. He didn't change his religious preference to Jewish or Muslim or anything else. The courts would find that he has to have the kosher diet, meaning religious authority has no authority in American law. It's the individual's sincerely held religious belief, even if it's in conflict with the religious authority. So then this brings us back to this story here with this person claiming that this Mishnah should be interpreted to mean, the Mishnah saying that a father has to teach his son how to make a living means that we should have the same type of education that's given in public schools in private schools. Otherwise the kids won't be able to make a living, which isn't true. Now, if someone's sincerely held religious belief, and it's a small minority that believe this, but there is a small minority that believes within the Jewish community that they're not allowed to even speak English, or that and it's not my belief, and it's not even, but there are individuals who believe this. I had someone who I knew, he was a Rosh Hashiva, from old Satmar Chassid, and he himself, he said, even though all the stories I heard was that the Satmar Rebbe said everybody has to learn English in my school, and if you're not, and if you don't want English, you go to a different school. However, this guy, he was a kid, he went to Satmar, and he said, you're different. According to what this guy told me, this rabbi told me, he said, the Rebbe said, you're different, you're from a different type of family, you don't have to learn English. And this rabbi told me stories about a certain rabbi in Hungary who had to learn Hungarian for government purposes in order to keep his job, and he was walking along one day with another famous rabbi, and he was like, oh, thank God, finally I'm looking at this sign, I don't recognize the letters of the Roman alphabet. And the same story was, there was someone who was asking the Satmar Rebbe to be ordained as a rabbi, and he refused. And he was already ordained as a rabbi, but he wanted to be ordained by the Satmar Rebbe, and the Rebbe refused. But then he said, "But I don't even know the ABCs. I have no secular knowledge." So right away, the Satmar Rebbe wrote him a smicha. So it's not even an idea that all Jews have to follow this, but there is an idea that certain parts of certain communities should be ignorant of secular knowledge. Now, this particular rabbi who I'm talking about, his father and his brother now owns. His father owned a health food store, and this rabbi is very knowledgeable about all different types of vitamins and what they do and different supplements. A brilliant mind. And so his father taught him a profession. He didn't need to get this in school. He got it from his father in the traditional way. In addition to being a great Torah scholar, he was a scholar of this, and it's something he could make a living off of. He chose not to. He chose to be Rosh Hashiva, but he did learn this. So, but despite that, the government cannot say, "Oh, Reform is right and Orthodox is wrong," or Orthodox is right or Reform is wrong. Even if you view these people as heretics and they are totally wrong, the government doesn't take sides. You have a right to be a heretic. You have a right to be an extremist. You have a right, as long as you're not hurting anybody else. That's America. We have the Salafi Muslims in the prison, but they don't hurt other people. They're peaceful Salafi, but they're extreme in their beliefs. But even certain things they're lenient in or whatever, and that's how it is. And that's fine. That's how America is. So what I'm saying is the government has no right. You don't like, you have a religious belief, you send your kids according to your conscience and your religious belief. Don't have the government force anything.